Okay, well, welcome to Beverage Marketing's How to Create PR Buzz for Your Brand webinar. As you know, today we're working in partnership with York Small Business Enterprise Center. And we're grateful to have the opportunity to partner with them today and talk to you about how to create PR buzz for your brand. My name's Elena Fordham, and I'm the founder and principal of Beverage Marketing. And just quickly, I'll review our team. Well, first of all, Beverage Marketing is a customer-centric creative solutions agency. So we provide marketing, communications, public relations, and event management for small to medium-sized businesses. And we're located in York Region in Aurora. So grateful to be here today and talk to you. So a bit about me. I've got 15 years or more, starting to lose track, of marketing, PR, and event management experience with small to medium-sized businesses. My background, I actually studied PR postgraduate I went to Western, and then I went to Humber and did a postgraduate certificate in public relations. And then I worked for PR agencies in the beginning of my career, moved into hospitality, but did marketing and primarily public relations for 4 seasons in the build up to the Winter Olympics in 2010. Then I went on to be the marketing director, also overseeing public relations for Bite Beauty, which was acquired. It's a Canadian company and it was small, but it got acquired by Sephora. And then my last sort of corporate gig was working in a marketing research firm in partnership with Better Homes and Gardens magazine out of New York. And a large part of what we did was selling PR programs to large consumer packaged goods companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever and such. And on my team, I've got Katie Zeppieri. She'll be joining us a little later in the call. She's, again, a communication strategist. Her background's in broadcast journalism. She's also a social media influencer with 10,600 followers on Instagram. She's got her own Girl Talk Speakers Bureau, where she really focuses on female speakers for events. And she even has her own podcast, so she's a busy girl. And then Miriam, who's actually just joining our call. Miriam Golub-Gear is our digital marketing expert. She is insanely good at programming. She's a website guru. She's incredible for anything to do with moving your business online. And she's also a regular speaker with York Region and the local chambers. So that is the team.
Nice.
So, Matthew, I've said this before. I appreciate you being on this call again, hearing it all. But we challenge entrepreneurs to say, why not me? It's the reason I got into my own business. And it's the reason I think a lot of people get into business is, they work for someone for a while, or they train up and realize like they're very out of the box thinker, and they like to work for themselves. They like the excitement of it, and they're resilient people. And we're problem solvers. So, that's why I love working with entrepreneurs most. And today, just a little agenda, we're going to learn about, first of all, what is PR and how it can help your brand and your business, how to target your audience, perform a competitive media audit or SWOT analysis. So looking at this from the lens of PR versus the overall strategy, how to develop story angles that you can pitch to media, how to target media, and then ultimately craft that winning pitch and get results. Some bonus items we've added today is how do you leverage influencer relations and PR tools of the trade. We also have a free takeaway today for anyone that attends. So that'll sort of help you start on your PR journey post webinar. So what is PR? This is kind of the dry bit, because PR is actually a very vast, very big area. It's a tactic of marketing, which I think a lot of people don't realize. And public relations ultimately is a strategic communications process that builds mutually beneficial relationships with organizations and their publics. So you may have various stakeholders that you're trying to reach out to in PR. So it could be your customer is usually the primary. You may have secondary and third, tertiary client or customers, but you may also have investors or like distributors or resellers of your product. So you have to kind of think about your messaging, because for each audience, it's going to be different. And then how you channel them or how you approach them, how you reach them is also going to be different. Today, we're primarily going to be talking about how to reach your customer, and whether that's business to business or business to consumer. So an interesting stat in 2014, so it's a bit older, but I think the reason I couldn't find a newer stat is because it hasn't really changed. I know when I worked in the research firm, every year we run these studies about word of mouth versus PR versus advertising, and always public relations or like a third party endorsement through media is typically the second or third thing that people trust the most. They trust if they're following a certain TV, news channel every day, or they're following a certain column in the newspaper, or they're following a certain influencer online. They trust that person's brand, and so they trust what they're saying. So if they're endorsing your brand, it's 90% more effective than advertising. And so on average, expert content lifted familiarity 88% more than branded content. So being an expert in your field and using PR to translate that message is very effective. It's also very cost effective, which we'll get to. So 5 reasons to do PR. The main one is PR is basically free. It's how much time you want to put into it, and you can do it yourself. It is obviously easier with an agency behind you who already has sort of relationships with media and knows the landscape and knows, how to write a press release. But these are actually things you can learn yourself, and there's a lot of DIY on the internet nowadays. And hopefully today we give you sort of the key elements you need to have a successful PR plan. We mentioned PR is more effective than paid advertising. PR is an amazing complement to your marketing activities. So it's, especially when you're doing like a launch or something new, PR is a great way to amplify and get more bang for your buck with everything you're doing in your marketing activities. PR increases brand visibility. And I think the main thing about PR is if it's positive PR, it can be huge for winning trust and for standing out from your competition. And lastly, PR can directly generate new leads and sales. And I think a lot of people miss that because traditionally PR was very hard to measure. But over time now, with everything moving online, it's actually quite easy to see when things are tracking to a sale as well. Those companies that traditionally ran surveys, how did you hear about us? I remember when I worked at Four Seasons, it would often be, I read this article in this UK ski magazine about your resort and I had to come, because it was like a 5-page spread, but it was all editorial. So again, it's like a trusted source. Any questions so far? Sorry, can you still see the screen? Because I just popped it. Okay, great.
Yeah, no questions yet. I'm good.
Okay, jump in anytime.
Sure.
So PR versus advertising. The real main difference, because a lot of people don't know the difference, is that PR is unpaid and advertising is paid. You're always buying an ad. You're buying that real estate in a periodical or a newspaper or wherever. PR is more trusted, as we talked about. Often advertising requires like a paid endorsement from a celebrity or a famous spokesperson or a trusted expert. Those lines are kind of overlapping now a little bit more and more, but generally, like there's a lot of PR that happens where it's free. Like you find an ambassador of your brand, who's someone who just loves your product, and sometimes they don't want to be paid. They just want to share their knowledge of like the industry or what things they love, and there's no monetary exchange involved, but there's a partnership that's established. And so now, like advertising and PR, often like our agency is amalgamating, because there's sometimes an overlap where the first time you work with an influencer, it's free. The second time you work with them, they want to be paid. Or they'll like do a couple stories on their Instagram, but they won't do a post. So, I mean, these lines are really blurring. And that's why you see a lot of agencies now offer marketing and PR and digital, because like all the lines are being blurred with this online world we live in. And influencers aren't necessarily journalists or studied journalism, so things have really changed online. But some things remain the same. So editorial in like a magazine is literally you sending your product and sending a pitch, or just sending a pitch and getting coverage without payment. Whereas an advertorial, you're paying for that real estate, that page or half a page in a magazine. So that still exists. It's just becoming more and more blurred. So I love this quote. Bill Gates said, "If I was down to my last dollar, I would spend it on PR, public relations." So yeah, I think that's really telling, because he's obviously been very successful. Um, and then, I have 7 steps to marketing, which I've talked about in my previous webinar, but there's actually there's a bit of a difference with PR. So like when I go into PR, I'm assuming my client has a pretty good understanding of their marketing landscape already. They've done an overall marketing strategy. Now they want to layer in PR. So the first thing we want to do is research the PR landscape. And that's actually quite different than like the marketing landscape. So, hopefully, like your territory and your demographics and, sort of your basics, but then you want to also look at your competitors and see what type of news coverage they've gotten or garnered through PR. And so we do Google searches and things like that. And there's all kinds of ways to research the marketing landscape, or sorry, the PR landscape. The second thing is identifying your target audience. You're just usually looking back at your marketing plan, but you're looking at it from a lens of the target audience, like where they find their information. Do they like using Instagram versus Facebook versus LinkedIn? You're looking at like what types of people they follow online. And we do a lot of this through like social listening, which I'll get to. And so there's a few ways to kind of parse it up, but basically, ultimately, we're trying to look at how does this person like to receive the message? And when do they like to receive the message, and how do they like to receive the message? So it's very focused when it comes down to PR. Number 3 is perform a social media audit. So this is really looking at your competitors and seeing exactly where they're pitching media, what news they're getting, what they've covered already, because you don't want to go to media and go back with like the same story that your competitor's done. It looks like you haven't done your homework. So you really got to make sure you check to see what your competitors have done. And it's also helpful for like awards. I think a lot of that stuff gets overlooked, but I look at that as under the PR umbrella. Awards, not really nominations, but any kind of recognition also goes under the PR umbrella. So I like to look and see where my competitors have won awards, or if they're in a startup in technology, like you can usually tell which summits they attended, which conferences they went to, what speaking engagements they've done, that kind of thing. So even in business to business, it can be very important to really know your competitor, because it saves you time, like figuring out which conferences are the right ones to go to. If you see a pattern of like all your competitors go to certain conferences each year. 4, develop key messaging. So from here, hopefully we have a pretty clear understanding of our audience, what they like, what they don't like. Um, and then we want to obviously message them specifically and segment them. And one thing Miriam's great at is with digital now, like even for example, on LinkedIn, she was talking the other day to a client about how you can really segment your message to the audience. You can do the same thing through PR. So you can target certain verticals. For example, if you have a platform or a business that serves different types of verticals. So for example, auto, insurance, education. You can target magazines for that industry with a different message, but the same product. It just paint the picture, give them the imagination, or give them a use case of like another customer you worked with in that field where they can say, oh, I see how you help them and I can see how you can help me. Number 5, develop PR strategy and create SMART goals. So for this one, I don't want to get into it too much, but like obviously strategy at the end of this session, I'm going to give you guys a takeaway for like how to conduct your own PR plan. And it's fairly simple. It works a lot like marketing. It's just taking the time to write it down. Have it in some place where, especially as you grow, you want to be able to scale. You need to be able to share a document that's written with your messaging with all your employees. And then obviously SMART goals are just, setting realistic, timely, doable, like you have the resources on hand type goals that you are actually like you could achieve for yourself. And so we apply that same method to PR. So we only take on as much as we actually think we can handle. So if you're a busy entrepreneur, maybe it's just a matter of, I want to reach out to two to 5 journalists every month, or, broadcasters, and pitch one idea per month or every 3 months. It's just whatever you can handle. Number 6, obviously it's good to have a budget in mind. So the actual outreach doesn't cost anything. Researching online doesn't cost anything, but there are other costs to be incurred, such as if you are sending product to a TV station, to a journalist, if you have to do a mailing where you're actually like assembling like a media kit plus with information about your brand and your press release or your pitch and a background or a little bio and some imagery or whatever, like that's quite traditional. Usually now we do that online, but you still have to package up your product in an interesting way to catch the attention of the journalist. And lastly, 7, we want to measure our outcomes. So the idea is that we set up some metrics at the start that we hope to achieve. Like I want to get in to like tier 1 would be like, national broadcast media and Globe and Mail, or like a very respected women's magazine like Chatelaine or something, and then, or House and Home. And then you have your like secondary media that you hope to achieve, which might be like mommy bloggers or like just like little more micro influencer blogs online. And then you want to measure your outcome. So how well did I do? Did my message carry? And if it's not working, we have to change messaging or like pivot a little bit. So this is really, that's why it's a circle, because it's like a constant reiteration of your messaging to ensure, it's a bit of trial and error sometimes. And also just making sure you do your homework. So 5 ways to use social to research the market and PR competition. So this is going back to that SWOT analysis we talked about, but specifically for PR. Just move this here. So the first thing is, the easiest way is to start setting up Google alerts for your industry and on your competitors. So you can put your competitor name in, or you can put just the industry or the type of like product you're interested in researching, and just, filter it for just news, and then sign up to like all the e-newsletters that are in your industry, and you'll quickly get an idea of what your competitors are up to. You want to research, again, the news tab for related competitor press. So like to look at the history of the competitor, you just do like a Google search and filter by news and put their name in and see what comes up. Um, you want to track their social media pages. There's ways to do this that are easier, like Hootsuite. There's so many, and a lot of them are free up to a certain point, depending on how many features you add. But that's super important because oftentimes it's on social media where people are really showcasing their content, their any coverage, media coverage they get, things like that. You want to search general hashtags or keywords on social media to try and look for trends. And like I said, employ a social listening tool to make your life a little easier. Oh, I see people are in the chat. Oh, Miriam wrote. Okay, so that's about it. So if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. I mentioned this on my last webinar, but again, targeting your audience, you just like the real question we want to get down to is what media and social channels are your consumer or investor paying attention to? Your colleagues in the industry, they're also an influence. They can also refer you, or so it's just trying to look at that. Like you go back to your business plan and you're really looking at it through a lens of PR. Oops. Target audiences. So this is just an example of a former client of mine. I think we worked together for about 3 years. They are called Hotel Doggy. They create outerwear like winter and clothes and like cute little sweaters for dogs, usually small to medium-sized dogs. And they're distributed in like now they're in Costco, they're in HomeSense, Marshalls, Home Outfitters. They're sold online on Amazon and I believe on Shopify. So they've really grown and expanded. And this is just an example to kind of get the juices flowing about what does it look like to sort of segment your audiences. But we've got Juliette Murray, sort of a young woman, single. She's a dog mom. She's obsessed with dressing her little pug, and she likes shopping for and photographing her dog. Like she has her own little like dog's social media page. So, she's considered somebody that would be like a primary audience for Hotel Doggy. The one thing about Hotel Doggy too is like part of their branding is like, we're not frou-frou, like we don't take ourselves that seriously. So a lot of their clothing is very like functional and cute, but not like frou-frou. So it's like, that's the kind of customer they have to find, is somebody that doesn't want to put like a tutu on their dog, but like wants their dog to be warm in winter. So obviously a lot of their region is North America and like the northern part of the US, East Coast, and Canada, obviously like all across Canada. Janie Parker would be a secondary audience. So she's a buying executive at Costco. So we were for a while kind of like trying to find really like big US art, like get into big US magazines, even if it wasn't, like an industry like veterinarian, whatever, like pets magazine, it would be like People magazine, and People has an offshoot called People Pets. And like we know that they have a huge following. So, millions of readers online. So that's the kind of article we wanted to garner in order to be able to share that later with the Costco buying executive, as we're sort of showing like we're trending, we're a hot item. The next sort of tertiary audience is like a dog dad. So there's less sort of dog dads with smaller dogs, but there's quite a strong gay community that loves their little dogs like their own children. So Joel Venizetti is an example. He's a dog dad. He loves the Instagram, like following like famous dogs on Instagram. Firm believer of animal rights and LGBT. So we did a lot of social media and like amplification through the LGBT community. We did a lot of work around like animal rights. We were partnered with an animal sanctuary in King City and did a lot of work around like trying to just amp up PR for that. Questions so far?
Nope.
So 5 ways to make a great pitch. So here we have a funny cartoon. He says, I've got an elevator pitch, an escalator pitch, and just to be safe, a stairway pitch. That's kind of how PR works. It's like you want to have different pitches for different journalists, and you want to have like, depending on what business you're in, like you can have longer pitches versus shorter pitches. I feel for lifestyle, they get inundated, like anything like food, fashion, they get inundated with like hundreds of emails a day. So you want to keep it like 200 words, 400 words max. Whereas with like B2B, you can be a little more expansive on your messaging and your pitch. You know, you have to give them some like, here's a case study or a testimonial, and this is who we're going to partner with, and this is our spokesperson. And like when I'm dealing with Globe and Mail, I'm really like careful, with my press release and my pitch, like everything's very timed and thoughtful. Lifestyle's a little more like fly on the go, but just an interesting thing to note is that magazines typically work 3 to 4 months out. And when you're talking like a holiday guide, you're talking like 6 months out for like the holidays. And then when you're dealing with online, sometimes you can get away with like a month out, but generally you're still looking at like 6 to 8 weeks, so like 2 months out. Nope. Oh, am I? It keeps doing that. Okay, so newsworthy content matters. So I guess the question is always like, what counts as newsworthy content? And here's some criteria to help you determine if your content is newsworthy. The first question to ask yourself, is it timely? Do you have a new product? Is this something totally different that no one's ever seen before? Is it trending right now? Is it seasonal? Impact. So journalists and like writers are always looking for, a story that affects a lot of people. So if you have a product or a service that can help a lot of people, or it's really current right now with like the pulse, like for example, during Black Lives Matter, like there was a lot of random PR stuff coming out, but there was a lot of very like targeted, people could tell that this was a really hot topic and it was also impacting a lot of people. So people were trying to come up with like ways to do PR around that, but were still meaningful and like on the pulse of the nation. Significance. So yeah, how many people does it affect? Proximity. So I find like stories that are close to home, for example, in York region, you can pitch York region because it's more newsworthy. If you are talking like, if you don't serve the GTA, for example, or you don't serve national, you're not going to go pitching a national newspaper necessarily. So those are things to take into consideration. Prominence, who is the spokesperson or the famous person involved? So oftentimes in PR, we partner up with an expert. For example, I was working on another dog brand in an agency, and it was like dog food. And we partnered with a famous vet out of Hollywood he's got like a following, and he does like weekly videos. And, he's again, like somebody very specific to that industry, but he's highly respected. So we did like a media tour with this person, and it was a paid play, but he did believe in the brand and the food and everything like that. So the last one's human interest. Does the story draw out emotion? Does it hit on a customer pain point? Is it bizarre? Is it controversial? The controversial one you have to be careful of, because you can also lose customers if you're too controversial. Case in point, I think Adamson Barbecue recently pulled some interesting moves against, sort of opening during a pandemic when they were not supposed to. Caused a ton, like a sensation of news, but it's like you have to kind of weigh out whether or not that's good PR or like negatively impact your customer base. So research your target media outlet or person. So the first thing you want to do is determine who you want to pitch based on their audience. You're not really looking at the outlet itself, but like you're looking at who that outlet, that, you know, whether it's the National Post or Toronto Star or, you know, Aurora, you know, or the Auroran, like who you're actually trying to reach. You have to ensure you know the journalist's own personal leanings. Just because you have to be careful. Like if you reach out to a journalist and you have a product that something that they've written about before that they can't stand, then you may get bad press. So you just have to really know your journalist inside and out, check all their social pages and make sure you kind of read up on them to see which way they lean. If, you know, for example, are they conservative or liberal or whatever the case may be. You want to read the publications you want to be in and watch the shows you want to be featured in so that you kind of get an idea of like what they like or what they like to cover. You want to ensure you have a Dropbox ready with lots of images, high resolution, low resolution, depending on if it's website or print. You want to have like little bios ready for your team, a backgrounder, maybe a fact sheet of like, you know, just when you got started, some interesting facts about your brand, just making it easy for the journalist to hit the ground running because they have very, very, very tight deadlines. You want to use descriptive names for your photos. That's also just so that they can find things easily and like, you know, by category, have it all in a Dropbox saved that they can easily access. So the other part to this is you want to gauge your story's PR worthiness. So we talked about like what makes good news or interesting news, coverable news. So the best way to do that is pay attention to the media coverage that other businesses in your industry receive and where they're getting it from. You want to look at reporters that are, well, when you're targeting reporters, you want to look for stories that are timely, as we mentioned earlier, affect a large number of people, have an emotional element, especially if it's entertainment or food related. You just want to like hit on like the excitement or the whatever the subject matter is. And sometimes in your pitch, it's important to like relate to what other stories or trends are happening in the industry. Because sometimes the best coverage is just being mentioned along with a couple other really key competitors in a trend piece, or other verticals doing similar things, but not direct competitors of yourself. If your business has a connection to a bigger story, again, you can improve your chances of getting covered. Perfect example was people who pivoted their businesses to create PPE equipment or hand sanitizer. You know, like we saw like distilleries that started creating hand sanitizer. Those stories are very relevant right now. And of course, they're going to get picked up by the media. You want to find something in common. So number 3, try to obtain insights on each of the reporters you're researching. And so, yeah, like I said, just find those little tidbits. Sometimes it's great to like compliment them on something they've written before that's similar, but you have like another angle for them. You know, this is just an example of like a writer who wrote about a relatively small shoe brand that is entering into kind of like high-end design and innovation. So this is just an example, and why I'm showing this to you is because here's a draft sample pitch where you're sort of saying, I pay attention to you as a writer. And you might want to start this process before you even reach out to them, like connect with them on Twitter or Instagram or wherever and start liking and commenting on their stuff, or on LinkedIn, their posts, so that way you're already forming a connection. So it's not like a cold outreach when you finally do email them. So here's an example. And one of the main reasons why it's like how to create a great pitch is you have to answer the question, I think in the first line or two at least, is why should I care? Like, why should the journalist care? Why should their readers or their viewers care? So when crafting your pitch, keep in mind the reporter you're addressing and their intended audience. Tailor your message to the specific journalist and lead in with the why to demonstrate you understand their media outlet, like their who they write for or work for and what they cover. This is how you get a standout pitch. So for like this woman, Anya, we saw in her previous article, it's like, I read your recent article in the Globe and Mail on designer running shoe trends and wanted to let you know about my company X. We handcraft designer running shoes that, and hopefully you have a unique point of difference than everything that was covered in that other article. Or maybe you're capitalizing on a new trend. And then how do we prepare to pitch? You have to have your target list ready. If you're doing it basic, I suggest just like an Excel sheet, kind of like when you're doing like sales. It's like you have your name, your contact information, your email, their phone number, if they provide it. And we'll talk about how you get those lists. And you want like a status where you can, what day did you reach out to them? And then like, what did you pitch them on? Because oftentimes you have different pitches for different writers or broadcasters or producers. And then your last thing is like status. So just so that you keep on top of follow up, because it's kind of like sales. If you drop the ball and you don't follow up in two days, 3 days, you could really lose that connection with that person. And maybe that you just fell to the bottom of the pile, which often happens. So the other thing you want to do is have your spokesperson ready so you know their schedule in advance of when they could possibly partner up on like a phone interview or a video or like come on TV. Like they have to basically clear their schedule for this opportunity, as we say in PR, you know, drop everything for the media. So that spokesperson has to be really prepped and also trained on what to say and how to weave in their messaging in a kind of natural way for that show. So like just prepping that spokesperson is really important. And then you're kind of that liaison between your company, the spokesperson, or whoever's going to go on TV or be on that interview, and the journalist. So you really want to be a resource. So being very reactive, very responsive, have all your ducks in a row, should I say, and be a resource. When you do that, they come back to you because they go, oh, that person was super easy to work with. They did a great job and they were really prepared. They made my life easy. Of course, they're going to call you before your competitor. So another interesting stat is that 70% of journalists chose Twitter as the most valuable social network to help them do their job. That was just last year. I think the other place you can find media, more business, but on LinkedIn, it's not as effective, I find. I find Twitter is super effective. And then if it's lifestyle or like a mommy blogger or, usually we just jump on their website and look for their email. Or on Instagram, a lot of people have their email listed if they're using their Instagram for like professional purposes. The cardinal rule: avoid spray and pray PR. It's very common for people to get like, super excited and want to get that PR story in. And they're like, maybe it went to the junk box and maybe this, maybe that. But really, like, you've got to, calling can be helpful, but you really have to know your journalist. Like Globe and Mail, they're pretty much used to having people call and follow up. But there's a lot of like media databases that PR people have access to where they literally say like, only email me. As well, like you should let like 2 to 3 business days pass before you follow up, just to not be annoying, because sometimes journalists will get like 500 emails, 200 emails, depending on how big they are. If it's New York Times, you can expect they're going to get a lot of email. They also have these with newspapers, they have like a central email to send, like news desk, or CTV will have like news desk. And so then someone's responsible for then redistributing to the right producer based on the topic. So there's time involved with that. You want to try to include new information or sources each time you write to them. So, like, have another nugget you can kind of add to your pitch, just so that it doesn't look like you're just following up on the previous email. It's like, oh, and by the way, did you know X stat or something? Or did you know we also have this other person available who could talk to you about X? It's just to try and like keep it like you're trying to be helpful and not annoying. And then if you still don't hear back, it's time to move on. That's the end of it. Re-strategize your pitch or find another journalist. So what we talked about, how you can give product to people as a way to get them to try your product. So journalists, you can't, give them money, but you can send them product, especially if it's in fashion or if it's food, but you're doing like non-perishable food, or let's say you're a fitness store and you have protein powders, like you can send that to the um, or like a protein powder company, you can send that product to various journalists. So typically, like if it's something higher end, I'll only do like 25. But let's say you have like a mass product, like a consumer product that's, fairly inexpensive, then I would say, 50, 100, like as many samples as you can get your hands on for this, for the journalists. And it's just, like the more people you send to, the more chance you have of somebody like really resonating with your brand or liking your product and running something on it, as long as you formally pitch them as well. You can't just send product and hope for the best. It's usually a coordinated effort. So that's called seeding, when you actually give away the product. Even Four Seasons, we would say we're giving away 2 room nights to X journalist who's coming in from England or from wherever, and coordinating like their whole experience. So they put them in the spa, give them a free meal, meet with a PR person for dinner, let them have a cocktail at the bar. Like we'd include all that just to have them write about us. So even large corporations do this. And then the opposite would be like lending product. And that's typically when you have something really high end, like a BMW car. So a friend of mine is head of marketing for BMW Canada. And like what they do is like lend the car out for photo shoots. They lend cars out to journalists to do a test drive. Within like luxury and fashion, like we'll lend out high-end earrings or jewelry for like a photo shoot or a red carpet stint. And see here, so a couple examples. I remember Bite Beauty, we used to give lipstick away to tons of movie stars, and somehow they'd be seen like on the street wearing it, and they'd be asked by a journalist, like, what are you wearing? And they'd say Bite Beauty. And oftentimes it's because they loved that it was like natural and like there was no animal testing or any of that. With jewelry, there was a company out of Mexico that had this gorgeous jewelry, and we ended up outfitting Nelly Furtado for a video, like a music video shoot. Jessica Chastain, we actually, with Hotel Doggy, we outfitted her dog with a TIFF sweater. When she came to town, we gave her a TIFF sweater for her dog, he's a 3-legged dog. He's a rescue, so it really aligned with our brand. She's a famous celebrity, and the owner of Hotel Doggy is obsessed with like film. So we talk a lot in our blogs about hotels, film, and sweaters. And so it just all kind of aligned. And we were selling these TIFF sweaters at the TIFF store, the TIFF shop, during like year round. And as well, Devin Soltiandic, he's like a kind of a VJ turned news reporter. I remember like we used to give away jeans during Virgin Mobile Festival. So we would like call like all the bands that were going to be attending, all the VJs, like anybody who was considered an influencer for this young crowd, and getting them on like wearing Levi's. And all of that was gifted. And what we get in return can vary. You can get a giant news article in like People magazine where the person's wearing it, it's like what she wore, or you can get a tweet, like Jessica Chastain retweeted us after she got this sweater. Another actress, her name escapes me. She's more of a B-list actress. She actually did like a whole video with her dog back in New York wearing the sweater. So seeding, giving away product, the ROI for that can be huge. And, when it's all aligned, for example, like with Bite Beauty, we did a launch. We had an agency in New York to go and visit with the journalists at the time they could do that. And they were giving the product and explaining the product and giving them the press release and walking them through the brand. We would get these massive pieces in like InStyle magazine in September, which is like, you can't pay for that kind of advertising. So a little bit about the press release. So the main things you want to cover in a press release, and really a press release is an announcement. So again, there has to be something really newsworthy to create a press release. But you want to answer right in the first paragraph, like who and what. So is it a new campaign? Like it's obviously your company and a new partnership, a new business launch, a new product line, new technology you're using. You're partnering with a new spokesperson, or maybe you've raised a whole bunch of money for your startup. So, anything over usually 3 million is where people start to get excited and write like a news release about that. Where? So you want to talk about like who this applies to. So are you talking about like, this brand that serves Canada and the US? Are you talking global? Or are you talking like regional? Are you talking York region? Like people need to know how, like, what market do you cover? When, obviously. So how long will the product be on shelves, especially if there's like a limited edition offering or it's only for the holidays or, um, only for the year. Why? So why will this resonate with the media outlet's audience? So again, you're always looking at the target audience and why should they care? And then you want to quote from either the owner of the company or a spokesperson, or if you're partnering, you want one from each side. So I'll show you guys an example. But, one company, they had BMW was the testimonial for this automotive, sorry, not automotive, for this platform, like a SaaS platform. And their spokesperson was like the marketing manager from BMW. So you want to quote from them. Obviously, that carries a lot of weight and might actually get you featured. And lastly, boilerplate. So a boilerplate's just like the same message you use every time you put out a press release. It's just a basic, like non-changing description of the company, when it launched, what's your brand promise, access to the website. And of course you want a media contact, like who in your company can the media call or reach out for further information. And now these press releases that you can post to the wire are, and they get circulated to like thousands of news desks across the country if you want, or they can be a very like segmented group. The expectation is that you're going to have photography attached to your news release, and if you're targeting broadcast, you should also have some B-roll, so just some general images of people at your company and how, like, that's something that's related to your press release. Questions so far? All good?
No, not yet. I'm just absorbing it all.
Okay, I know it's a lot.
No, it's good though. It's good.
So here's a sample press release. Somebody started a global Kickstarter, and like everybody and their mother wants a Kickstarter campaign and wants to put a press release. But what's interesting about this one was that they actually talked about, how they're giving back through the clothing that they want to create, saying that it's like activewear made from ocean pollution, nylon waste, plastic bottles, for example. So that's kind of eye-catching, especially if you're targeting environmental publications, or you're targeting fitness, but you want to stand out from the crowd, or you want to target innovation. Again, you're standing out from the crowd, like if you're looking for investors. Limelight marketing platform. So this is that company I talked about. They did 3.1 million in seed funding, and they partnered with BMW, was like their first major client. So we did a lot of like quotes over here. We had like a quote from BMW Canada. That helped us get seen by a lot more people. This was a launch I did for Wealth One Bank of Canada. They're a Chinese Canadian bank. So it was the first time there was ever a bank that's kind of dedicated to Chinese Canadians and um, helping them with very specific pain points, of moving money or language and just culture, like how people are approached and served is quite different, the culture. So this bank was dedicated to that. So we ended up doing an exclusive with Bloomberg, which it was Bloomberg Canada, but then it got picked up in the States. And then before you knew it, like we end up having investors calling from California and people calling from, and then it made its way to China and into international press in China. And then soon enough, we had phone calls coming in, people wanting to put money in the bank. So just out of like pride. So it was a really interesting campaign and it was very strategic. We thought, okay, we got to go big or go home. So let's hit a really big news outlet first and then go out to all the sort of smaller ones. Typically, if it's lifestyle, I like to do it backwards, where I go to the smallest one and really hone especially if it's on TV, like hone that kitchen segment and like get the messaging down and get the chef warmed up and then start to graduate and show that video to the next, producer and the next producer and the next producer to kind of show like this guy's ready for TV. Another great way to get content is author it. So you pitch the journalist or the blog, let's say it's automotive, you say like, I can write a piece about X for you. I'm a subject matter expert in this, or we're currently working on this type of project. And so I think I can provide some real value. Wherever there's like advice, tips, covering new technology, that kind of thing. If you're sort of ahead of the game and you know what's coming down the pipeline, or you offer something nobody else does, then guest authoring is great. So I had one woman, Wendy Dennis, she's a ghostwriter, but she created this little revenue stream of writing speeches for weddings, for parents, for brides and grooms, for toasts from the, whoever. And then she also was doing kind of like speeches for funerals. So it was a really niche thing, but we managed to get her in destination wedding magazines, blogs, and she would kind of tweak her pitch each time, but she basically offered to do like, I'll give you like, here's what not to do in a wedding toast. And so she's presented in another outlet, but it's actually her name, like she wrote it. So that's just one example. You can offer to be an expert, like a subject matter expert. So again, like we pitched Wendy to CBC. She got on there on radio at like 4:00, and it was awesome because she, weddings is not her main stream of revenue. She writes legacy books for people, and she ended up getting a client for a legacy book out of that one like radio interview, which was only, I think, Toronto or Ontario. And it was only because she just briefly mentioned, they were like, oh, so is this your full-time thing? You write wedding toast? And she's like, well, no, actually, like my main thing is ghostwriting books for like CEOs and like famous people. And also like legacy books for people that want to like leave behind a book about their life and story to their family. And somebody called her after that and was like, oh, I need a legacy book. So, that's a much bigger ticket item. But we knew that it's harder to pitch that than it is to pitch a wedding tips, which affects a lot more people. Like everybody can relate to writing a wedding speech. So yeah, she then got picked up by Breakfast Television because they saw that, and one of the producers saw it and then called her and said, would you mind coming on our show and doing something like What to Avoid? So it's like wildfire once you start. You can promote by season. So here, like I was talking, we were trying to get into Costco. So we really needed some bigger like magazines out of the States to kind of get that like brand awareness. And so we got into People Pets with like 10 products your pets are totally crushing on this fall. And we picked our most like kind of fun moto jacket. Then we pitched for like online shoppers, we pitched like a gift that you could buy literally for any pet owner. You don't need to worry about the size. You know, these are considerations when you're pitching things seasonally. Is like something that someone can buy someone else as a gift and they don't have to return it would be like a blanket with, you know, cute doggy toys versus a sweater that may or may not fit the dog. Um, DIY concepts work super well in the local region because a lot of the especially TV, their focus is trying to um, teach people how to do things themselves at home, especially during COVID. Like all of a sudden there's this like trend of people like baking their own bread at home or making their homemade pasta. So this was actually pre-COVID, but I was trying to pick examples where it could apply like right now. And so Chef Michael Angeloni, who oversees Amano Pasta, which is a restaurant chain throughout the GTA, and then also Union Chicken. We did separate segments for both, but one was like fried chicken and like different fun recipes you can do at home. And then the next one was how to make your own pasta at home and like how to, you know, make a pasta dish. So we started him on a circuit. We started with CHCH in Hamilton because it's smaller and it was a little less intimidating. And then he graduated to CP24 and then he went on to do CTV, which is national, and, you know, getting more comfortable in front of the camera and working with, you know, Ben Mulrooney. You know, you want to be prepared. So it's best to kind of start small and get your like, you know, getting used to talking and making food at the same time and, you know, entertaining the host, all of those things. He required some coaching, but he was phenomenal. He got it so quick. And again, like all of this, where you can see down below with Ben Mulrooney, is like this, we had to go in and style the shoot. I think now actually it might be easier with COVID. You can just do like a Zoom call and style it all at home, or just pick a very like basic setting to present your story. Here's a quick clip. It was aimed for unique visual content. So this group is called Bonanza, and they basically do like frozen bananas dipped in all kinds of crazy things. So we basically picked their wildest, also Canadian maple, I think it was like maple syrup and caramel or whatever, and they were dipping it in this big vat of chocolate. It's super visual. So that's just the kind of thing where you want to entice your audience with like colorful and outrageous concepts and visuals. That's what producers want. They want like kind of the out there thing. It might not be your number one seller as a product, but they're looking for something a little out of the box. Same thing with Four Seasons. We'd always come up with these like outrageous spa packages that like nobody would actually buy because they'd be like so over the top. But when you're pitching journalists, you want to show them that, right? To kind of stand out from the standard like back massage. I even had a lawyer call me one time and was like, I need PR. And it was actually his idea. He wrote this really like over the top press release. I had to kind of dial it back. So I'm like, it's still news. But you know what? You leave it to the journalist to come up with the sassy titles, but you want to promote the bizarre. So he literally had a class action lawsuit with a major hospital group, like a regional hospital, and out in Mississauga. And, there was this whole like data breach, and it was like from a doctor's office. It was just like so sensational that it got picked up everywhere because it was just such a bizarre story. But again, you got to really consider carefully how this affects your brand. So like a class action lawsuit doesn't really affect the guy himself taking on this case, but every brand is different. So you really have to think through, like, if you're going to do something controversial or bizarre, just make sure that it's like, what's my end goal? This is a really old photo of me, but this is when I worked in agency. But with Special K, we partnered with Carson Kressley. So this is what I mean by a celebrity spokesperson. It was all about like losing weight. This is back in like the 2000s when everyone was just diet after diet. So they were talking about, how do you lose weight eating Special K? And So they used me as like the person who had lost some weight, which is true. I'd actually eaten Special K and lost some weight. But yeah, they brought Carson Kressley into my home and we did this whole segment with ET Canada, and it was like over the top. And but it, you get a lot of views. So if you want to, like, another important area that we often goes like remiss is the industry. So you still want to garner respect within your own industry. So I, recently had this like awakening where I'm like, I need to do more PR for my own brand. So I was part of this group, and it's like Association of Business Communicators, and it's international. And then they have this little segment for professional communicators, like independents, like myself. And they asked me if they could interview me. But I, if I was smart, I would have pitched this like ages ago. Hey, why don't you interview me? This is what I can do for you. So basically, providing tips for other entrepreneurs who are up and coming, and giving them like, here's what it's like running your own agency or a creative, as a freelancer. Like, what do you need to do? What do you need to think about? Here's how to get started. This went over super well. I was actually surprised because it's not like a massive publication, but I amplified it everywhere on all my social channels, even my personal stuff. And like my Facebook blew up because people were like, oh, wow, congratulations. I had no idea you had your own company, or like people from high school, like, but it's all good, right? Like just even getting your name out there on LinkedIn and Facebook, it doesn't matter. Like everybody, now you're top of mind. This was the example I told you about partnering with a prominent client. So this was just like an industry vertical that, ran the story. It was called Marketing Magazine. I think now it's called Strategy. But we went on to then target like the startup community and saying like, we raised a bunch of money, and then it got picked up like by BetaKit and other companies or other publications. So this is kind of funny, but I think the main thing to remember is that, you can start the ideas flowing for a journalist, but often, or a producer, but oftentimes they'll come back and have like a way cooler or funnier idea or another way of seeing your brand. So for example, with Amano Pasta, we did like this brunch where we gave away everybody, like we basically said, you and 3 friends can come have brunch, which is fairly generous, especially for that restaurant. But they all kind of came in one morning, took over the restaurant on a quiet day. They all just started going crazy with like photographing and Instagram stories and like making silly videos. And like, it went viral. It was really fun. They barely ate the food. Just took pictures of it for the most part, wrote about it. We had to actually make them another set of food because everybody's food got cold. But it was wild just to see what these young people could come up with, using filters and Snapchats and all this stuff. And this was several years ago, but I pitched National Post on like the dog sweater. And I said, and I knew this journalist had a dog. I had done my homework and like a little dog, and I sent him the sweater and he absolutely loved it. And then he came up with this idea to put a GoPro on the back of his dog and like go through TIFF from the eyes of a dog. So I wish I could say I came up with that, but just by, doing my homework and knowing he was passionate about animals and then sending him the sweater without really pushing for anything like specific, he came back with a way cooler idea than I could have. And it became like this 4-minute video where the dog actually had like a voice and was like walking through and like checking out all the red carpet and everything. It was really neat. So that's it for me. I'm sure you're tired of listening to me. We've got a bonus presentation here on influencer relations with social media guru Katie Zeppieri, who I introduced at the beginning of the call. And I will switch off my camera and over to you, Katie.
Hi, thank you, Elena. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, this is just such an informative session. And I think like all of the insights that Elena's been sharing with you thus far are so tangible. Like there's really some great takeaways that you could implement right now in your business to help expand your PR reach. And so I just really wanted to come on here and build on what Elena's been talking about, specifically talking about influencer marketing and influencer PR. So I'm speaking to this from a few different perspectives. One, of course, I run campaigns for companies and for clients. And so we'll actually do the work of finding the right influencers and putting together pitches and making these connections happen and building successful campaigns, both short-term and long-term. I'm also an influencer myself, a micro-influencer. And so over the past 5 years, I've had the privilege of doing some partnerships with a wide variety of companies, including Paris Jewelers. I'm actually wearing their earrings right now. They're sponsoring not only an Instagram live show that I do, but we also have like a giveaway contest that we're doing on my page actually later today. Planet Fitness, Diva Cup, Girl Guides, all of these companies I've had the privilege of doing paid campaigns with on my page. And as you can see, the fit, in terms of how it meets my brand messaging is right on board. And that's because not only do I have marketing clients and a marketing agency, but I also run a Girl Talk Speakers Bureau. And before that, I ran a girl empowerment initiative with school chapters internationally and building Canada's largest girl empowerment event. So right away, there's some sort of keywords and things that sort of come to mind when you come across my profile, which is the empowerment piece, the female angle piece. And so a lot of the relationships that I've had with brands have been perfect because they align really well with the work that I'm trying to do. And I think it's good to hear that, like, especially for business owners to hear like how the fit should be, because when it comes to influencer marketing, it really is about that authentic relationship. There's certain products that, one, if somebody asked me to promote, I wouldn't. But two, it just wouldn't be good value for that company or for that brand because that's not my audience. That's not who I speak to. And you want to make sure that it's the right fit from both ends in order to have a successful campaign. So defining an influencer, look, influencers can be on many different social media channels. Like right away, what we're really speaking to here at the moment is Instagram. And that's been where a lot of my paid promotion has been on Instagram. Instagram is the one that you think of, the platform that you think of when you think of business to consumer. It's the place to be for sure. And there are also other social media pages that are great. But Instagram's kind of the one that comes top of mind. For B2B, LinkedIn is actually a phenomenal spot for those sorts of influencer campaigns as well. And it's really interesting to see like the many different creative ways and levels that you can use influencers to help further your brand reach. And so an influencer is somebody who has some sort of following on their social media page. We typically say 10K or more followers. Sometimes it makes sense to work with influencers who have fewer than that, especially if it's like a local geographic specific event, product, or service. But the goal of having an influencer work with your brand is to attract new leads and customers and elevate your brand by association. So moving on to the next slide, wanted to share a little bit more about how we actually begin to work and start campaigns with influencers. So you can have campaigns with influencers that are spontaneous in the sense of kind of like Elena was speaking to earlier, you try and give like a free product or a free trial or something like that to an influencer and hope that they will speak about it. I can speak to this from the side of sometimes I will have brands reach out to me and want to just like mail me a product to try or to test. And there's no ask. They're not saying, can you please post? But of course, you know, in the package that I'll get, it'll have their social media handles. It's sort of implied that if you love this product, would you feel comfortable speaking about it? And so that does happen. It absolutely happens. And I've done it, and many other influencers and campaigns that I've worked on, where it's like, let's get an influencer to just try this product. And if they love it, they're going to share it. But oftentimes what you'll see, and where you'll see that being shown, are Instagram stories. So those are the wonderful little pieces that kind of show more behind the scenes of an influencer's life. And those stories last for 24 hours. And so there's benefits to stories in terms of, you know, people see it, they can easily kind of like click through to look at a company page. An influencer could include, especially if they have 10,000 or more followers, then they have access to a swipe up link where people can swipe up and view your products, view your business page. But when you haven't given like a clear directive, when it's not a paid partnership, you don't get to specify any of these sorts of pieces. So you're almost just like hoping for some sort of mention. It means that, one, the brand, the branding and how the influencer speaks about your brand might not be exactly how you'd like it to be, because they're just going to speak about it, right? I like this, but they're not necessarily going to list all your features and get the keywords and get all of those pieces just right. They're also less likely to be concerned with certain things, like if there was like a hashtag that you really wanted to use, or a swipe up to your website. Like, again, those are all like bonus, extra, high value things that come typically from paid exposure. So that's kind of a sense. And then for paid social posting with influencers, oftentimes it's separated into either like a feed post, when we're talking about Instagram here, like a feed post, which is typically a higher priced item because it lasts. It stays up on the influencer's page. So it's not just the 24-hour exposure, but can actually continue beyond that. Also with a feed post, there's great opportunities to sponsor and kind of help boost the impressions of that post. There's also the stories as well, which again have their benefits, where, like I said, like a swipe up, I found that to be so helpful with my own brand, and also with the clients that I work with. They really love the idea that it's like, if somebody's interested in a product, they can easily swipe up. They don't need to click anywhere to kind of access the website. And oftentimes brands will do a campaign that combines both. So like feed posts as well as stories. And that's speaking specifically to Instagram here. But now all the social media pages, you guys, are adding stories. Like, I'm even trying to keep up myself. You know, LinkedIn's added stories, right? I'm seeing Twitter. I've just noticed recently Twitter is starting to add a story feature as well. So all of the different channels of how to connect with influencers are expanding. But it is the way to market. I'd say especially for direct to consumer, business to consumer brands in this day and age, in 2020 and beyond. And that's for the reason that if you ask yourself, you know, take a look at some of your purchases over the past year. How did you hear about those brands, right? And I know if I start to even do that with myself, more often than not, it's because I've seen something on Instagram, maybe an influencer that I admire, or, you know, a featured post or something, a tag, a clickable mention in a story. And it's like, wow, I want to check out that product. And I have done that, where it's been like, I've seen something and it's just led me to kind of want to go ahead and make a purchase. And then there are brands and campaigns where it's like, you hear about something, but maybe you're not in the market for it right now. So for instance, maybe it's something like a bigger purchase item, like a mattress or something like that, where it's like, you might not need it right now, but you've seen posts and you've seen a couple of the brands who are doing really great stuff, and you've seen influencers talking about them. And then, you know, 2 years down the road, when you actually do want to upgrade your mattress, these sorts of brands come to mind and you'll actually go search them. The other thing that I will say is, when you're speaking to a consumer market, and depending on your demographic, if you're targeting like millennials, but even the age range on Instagram is expanding and growing into older demographics as well now. People use social media sometimes the social media pages before they'll even go to a website. And again, I can speak about this too, because even for Black Friday sales and shopping, I wasn't going to search Google. I was going to search Instagram, right? And I was looking at the brands and I was looking at different types of, whether it was lifestyle or beauty products or whatever it might be. I was looking in those categories and I was looking on the brand pages, on their Instagram pages to see, did they have any sales going? What were they promoting? All of that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting to see how consumer behavior is shifting a little bit. And that sort of social media presence is really, really important. And those connections with key like-minded influencers who have solid brand alignment are becoming more and more important because it becomes an extension of your brand, and it really shows what you represent, what you stand for. It's also a more intimate connection when it comes to working with an influencer, because people who are following these influencers build this like no trust factor with them. So they love their content, they like what they stand for, their mission. And then when that influencer is promoting or talking about, wow, like I really love using this, this is so great, it just feels like it's, authentic. It feels like it's the right match. And that's because the benefit of working with an influencer as opposed to just posting an ad out to anybody is the people who follow this influencer trust them and they're going to trust their opinion. A word of mouth endorsement from an influencer is worth approximately 3 times that of traditional advertising. Influencer marketing also allows you to target niche social circles. And that's great too, because you can really start to segment your messaging based on who the influencer is, who follows them, what subjects they speak about, and you can kind of target an angle and segment your unique sort of product or service. Now, I wanted to speak to the types of influencers, and this is just like a really helpful sort of chart. There are different ways to segment categories of influencers, but there's a wide range. And sometimes if you haven't worked in influencer marketing before, you might be thinking, oh my goodness, like celebrities, that's going to be like big budget type stuff. That's, that's the high end of influencer marketing, and that feels out of risk for a small business. But celebrities are, of course, the top level of the influencer sort of chain. They are expensive and they reach a mass audience. So these, generally speaking, are for the big brands, and celebrity endorsements or influencer marketing are really about brand awareness. It's about like pumping out the name, getting people familiar with the name of a brand. Same thing with macro influencers, but to a lesser extent. So macro influencers are generally considered to be 100,000 followers plus, like 100,000 to the 1 million mark. And these are people who now, they're the kind of people who get recognized on the street. They're trusted stars with vast reach who publish content. But generally speaking, they're people who have done so based on building like their online presence, whether it's a blog or they're kind of like an expert in a particular area. And they've sort of elevated to the level where they've gotten a little bit of a celebrity type status where people recognize them. And so again, at this stage, it's still achieving a broader reach, and it's good and recommended when you're trying to just get the word out there about your business. And then we come into like the next levels here, which I'm often working in with the clients that I work with. So we have like the 20K plus, which is sort of targeted as professionals. These are journalists, business leaders, subject matter experts. And underneath that are the micro influencers, approximately like 1,000 to 10,000 followers. And these are niching more and more as we kind of go in the professionals, as we go into micro influencers. Oftentimes these influencers are speaking to very specific topics, very specific themes. Their whole page might even be based on one sort of topic like health or well-being or fitness or what have you. And so when you start to work with these levels, well, it sounds like, oh, okay, they've got fewer followers compared to like, say, the celebrity status, but then you start to recognize that their followers are following them for specific reasons, maybe their area of expertise or interest. And so if your business falls within that area of expertise, it might be a great channel for you to get not only exposure, but also we often see like a higher conversion rate when you do a good job of aligning the influencer with the category and niche that your business services. And then there's nano influencers. So that's like kind of under 1,000 followers. And these can be very influential people in their circles, and there's certain circumstances, as I was mentioning, if you had like a local based business that serviced a specific community, you'd probably want to look for people who are in your city, right, nearby, and who have influence there, like your mommy bloggers, or someone who's like an expert, or sort of like a guide within that city who could really speak to the uniqueness of that area. Then it might be a very effective campaign to work with nano influencers. So case study, I could give so many different examples. I was talking to Elena saying, oh my goodness, pre-COVID, the influencer campaigns sometimes involved like live event exposure and, in-person type things. But of course, right now we're all working to adjust and pivot to make things happen in this sort of virtual world. And a recent campaign, just to give you an example, that my marketing agency hosted was for a startup company called First Session. And they're an online platform that allows people to find and connect with therapists online. So it's really cool. You can go onto their website and actually watch introductory videos of all of their therapists. So beforehand, when people needed to find a therapist, it's like maybe you got a referral from your GP, or maybe you did some Googling, but there wasn't really that personal connection. And you kind of just see like a name, maybe a headshot, but you don't really know much about this person. And so you're kind of just going for it with your first appointment, where First Session makes it easy for people to actually watch these videos. You get a sense of who the therapist is. Is it the right fit for you? And then you can actually book your session all through their platform. So when I was approached by First Session to lead an influencer campaign, we were having a conversation about, what's the right angle? What's the right way to get this message out? Are we looking to have influencers post pictures? Are we looking for them to do videos? What are the different elements that we'd be asking for? And right away, what felt right was a video message for a few reasons. One, First Session's platform is all about introductory videos with therapists. So it makes sense that an influencer campaign should also be videos. And I think that really helps extend that intimate sort of relationship in this case. And talking about something as heavy as mental health means that you want to create this really personal connection, and you want to be able to say things and speak to your own story and journey. And so that's where this idea came for the hashtag Find the Right Fit campaign, which just went live just less than 2 weeks ago now. And we partnered with two amazing and inspiring influencers, Lily Youngie and Zara Alibai. Lily has 30 plus thousand followers, and Zara has over 150,000 followers. So we were kind of hitting in that micro influencer industry expert levels. And each one had their own unique take on the campaign. So Zara is very much about fitness and health and well-being. And Lily is very much a lifestyle blogger. She's also a model. And so each of them had their own stories and how they approached. And we asked them to talk about their own journey with mental health. And so we were obviously looking for influencers who felt comfortable enough to do that, because it's very vulnerable to do. And then talk about the importance of finding the right fit when it comes to a therapist. And the reason being here is, if somebody doesn't understand your unique story, your unique background, if you feel like they can't even relate to you, it's not going to be a good fit. It's not going to be a successful outcome. We see that therapy is more successful when it is the right match between the client and the therapist. And so we were really proud of this campaign. We did a story-focused campaign. So each of these lovely ladies posted and had their videos and their stories, and were able to get some great engagement that way. And we got over 100,000 impressions in total, got a real conversation going on mental health, and just another example of how you can use influencers to really elevate your brand.
Thank you, Katie. That was amazing. Katie's got the inside track as an influencer herself. So once again, I'm just going to quickly just take you through a couple PR tools of the trade. So we talked earlier about social media planning. So planning posts that will help amplify and your message. So once you get coverage, you obviously want to promote it. So I find like auto scheduling is really helpful with Hootsuite or Later, which focuses on Instagram. It also allows multiple people in your team to like look at what you're doing before it goes live. Researching your competitors and industry trends is obviously super important. So Google Alerts is kind of my go-to. For social listening, you can also use Hootsuite, or there's a bunch of free platforms, but SomeAll is another one of them, where you can track your competitors and certain keywords or trending hashtags. And it just allows you to keep track of like what's hot and what are people saying, and keep your ear to the ground within your industry. For media list building, I've been using Meltwater. I've also used Cision. They're pretty pricey, which is I think why a lot of people outsource PR. They'll go to a consultant or an agency to do it. It's also just the relationships that we tend to have. We tend to be in touch with them for the multiple products. So it's not like out of the blue or cold calling them or reaching out to them with a pitch. And we're just, I've trained in PR. So it's just knowing what, ethics and all that, that the back end stuff that a lot of people don't always know. Media list building, we've talked about. Okay, so design social posts and PR assets. I find Canva super helpful. Anything for generating like resizing posts, or also like photography, or creating like a beautiful press release or a beautiful fact sheet, like just making it look a little bit more branded and professional. And it's really designed for amateurs. It's very intuitive. And it's what I use today to design today's presentation. So, always our advice to entrepreneurs: take advantage of the inexpensive tools available to you. The last thing is we will attach in the chat after this call 10 steps to create a PR plan. It's just a free takeaway. Kind of breaks down all the things you need to create a proper PR plan for yourself and get started on that, your next pitch. So I hope you all enjoyed the webinar today. Please, if you have any questions, now is the time. And again, Beverage Marketing, we're a marketing communications firm, and these gals that work with me, we're the team to help you stand out from the crowd, whether it's PR, marketing, or events. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, to the York Region's Enterprise Center. Any questions?
No. Elaine, I have one kind of question, I guess. In my business, I'm still starting the business, and in my business plan, I've separated, like I have all these things. I have colleagues that are journalists in the industry, and I've got some ideas on influencers and social media and stuff. I built all that into my marketing plan. I mean, should I separate that into a separate kind of PR plan?
I find sometimes it is helpful, only because PR, you're taking that information and you're even distilling it even more. So like, what's your message to the journalist, and then what's your ultimate message to the target audience can be helpful. And then that sort of opportunity to brainstorm actual pitches and like PR tactics. Because I find if you just have a marketing plan, it'll get lost in the shuffle. But if you actually have like okay, here's my timeline for PR, here's the influencers I'm gonna reach out to, this is what I'm gonna supply them with in terms of, do I need a press release, do I need a separate pitch for this type of outlet or this vertical?
Right.
So yeah, it's good to just separate it out. It doesn't take nearly as long. That's the good part, because hopefully you've done all your homework. It's just now like taking that, and also taking that extra step to do an audit on your competitors from a PR standpoint. So looking at like news coverage, like we talked about earlier, and like social listening, like looking on their social media and seeing what kind of PR they've done for themselves.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. What do you mind if I ask what type of business? It's business to business or business to consumer?
Business to consumer. So it's a fashion brand.
Oh, okay.
kind of a unique brand, but my hardest thing is trying to figure out who my competitors are, only because it's a very niche kind of market, and
Yeah.
it's my, I've broken down who my target kind of, audience is, and my target customer, but it's such a range. I mean, it's, in demographics and age group, and it can range over so many different types of people.
I
That's been my
guess
toughest thing.
what I would say then is, what's your low hanging fruit? Because usually, even within a large group, there's usually like, if it's male, female, old, and young, within that, there's a group that buys the most or is
Right,
most likely to purchase.
right,
Start with them, right? I always
right,
start with like the easiest thing. And just knowing with fashion, like if it's like sort of like ready to wear kind of H&M style stuff, you got to kind of think, you got to give away quite a lot of product to get people like to all these journalists or to producers and stuff, just to get them like to touch and feel. And
right,
and if it's something high end, you can say, I can lend it to you, and then we'll arrange to have it couriered back, if you
right,
want to use
right.
it for a photo shoot or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Is it high end or kind of like low end, sort of like
It's
fast fashion?
pretty high end. I'm starting out with very small kind of quantities, and it's the cost to produce is very high because I'm doing it all in Canada. Um,
Yeah.
it's been kind of my, one of my mandates from the beginning was to try and keep things sustainable as best I can. And the idea of manufacturing in Canada was important. So, but I mean, the cost of doing it here is just,
Exorbitant.
yeah, it's really high.
Have you considered designed in Canada? Because I mean, I know like it doesn't sound as good, but I have brands that I've worked with where they've realized the same thing. And so what they do is like it's designed in Canada and it's part of it's made in Canada, like maybe the final part of it, but like they literally part of it's done overseas. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not, I mean, it's not ideal, but it's just realistic. It's the reality of our market. It's just very
yeah.
difficult to do the whole thing in Canada.
I mean, COVID has set me back a little bit with this stuff, but I did do a lot of research, and I found potential partners in all different kinds of places, China, Portugal, Singapore. But then I kind of I found a supplier, excuse me, in the Toronto area, that's got a really great product that might be an easier way for me to start with, even though it is more of an expensive kind of garment.
Mhm.
But
Sounds good. I think it's just then you want to align yourself with those high end fashion influencers. And, if you're not sure, it's okay to say, like, how do you best like to be served? Like, do you prefer if I send you stock imagery or do you want to do photo shoots? Usually they like to use the same filters for all their imagery. So that's why they like to
right,
get product, do a photo shoot, and then send it back.
right,
But I pay, like with my clients, I always say you got to pay for all the courier and make it super easy for them, like whatever,
yeah,
to make their life easy. And if they have some crazy timeline, like pay the extra money to make the timeline, because they'll call you again if you have a new product coming out.
right, right,
The other thing about fashion, because I've worked with some really high end fashion, um, like for an example was Maison Patina in Toronto. So they do like patina shoes and they were sending them to the States and stuff. Like we were sending shoes to like all, like because they were sold online, you could sell to the States. We started doing like press with like all of the big men's magazines in the US.
right,
And one thing that was hard for them to digest was like, you can't just send it once. Like you got to do it like a few times, be top of mind over the course of a year. And then where it makes sense, they'll incorporate it into a photo shoot or, but one other idea is to, try to find like people who maybe are into fashion, but maybe they also like cars. So you're kind of like reaching a new audience beyond just fashion people. Because not all men, for example,
right,
follow fashion, but they might love cars and they might like nice clothes, but they're not like fashion people. So
right,
you kind of got to try to cross the boundaries of find like lifestyle writers who
right.
also happen to be very well dressed, and
It
see if there's a way to like do a double photo shoot where they're like, it's more about the car, but then there's a model there wearing your stuff. Or,
right, right.
yeah,
It's,
you just
it's
gotta like
funny. It's funny you say that. Um, because my brand, it is automotive.
Really?
Yeah. So it's all based on, you know, kind of the heritage aspect of motor racing and things like that. So it is an automotive brand essentially, but it's kind of melding automotive and fashion together. So
And
yeah, I've thought about.
another idea for you might be to partner with like a big automotive company and come up with some apparel for them or something, just
Yeah.
to get your name
Yeah.
out there. Like, because like fashion, they like right now one of the hottest things is like partnerships. So like,
Right.
for example, BMW partners with X fashion
Yeah.
company to
Yeah.
create new apparel for 2021, and you know this is like a hot new item. It's
Right.
nobody else is doing it. It's exclusive, and then you get your name out there to a lot more investors, distributors.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So you just have to kind of think cleverly. I've always tried to work with like fashion people and like mix it with cars, or fashion and mix it with
Right.
food, or just like cross the boundaries so that you're not just hitting one type of person.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome. And
thanks for that info. I appreciate that.
yeah, of course. Anytime you want a free consultation, we're more than happy. No strings attached. We just love helping entrepreneurs, and we're always like full of ideas. So,
Right. That's great.
and Josie, I saw you join the call a little bit later. Did you want to talk about anything about what you're working on in your business?
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Yeah, I apologize. I did join a little bit late, and I didn't get much out of it, but I see your screen here that says you can, maybe I can give you a call, talk about our business. We're about 2 years into our business. It's the taro chip that we're creating. It's a food company, a snack company, and we are right now struggling with marketing and getting our brand out there. So we are currently launching in Ontario. We are working with a distributor to get to basically saturate Ontario before we hit other provinces.
Yep.
And our product is basically an all-natural, gluten-free, vegan taro chip. And yeah, so I'll probably be calling you. Maybe we can talk about the product and see you know, where you can guide me as far as some strategies around marketing, because that's what I'm looking at right now, how to get the brand out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I absolutely worked in food for a long time, like from hospitality, food and beverage, restaurants, down to like CPG companies, like major companies out of the States, and even smaller ones. Because I was selling an awards program to them through Better Homes and Gardens magazine in the States. So I definitely have a lot of ideas around like how these companies get their name out. So if you'd love to chat, I'm more than welcome, more than open to do that. And yeah, well, hopefully we can connect offline. Thank you so much for attending. And I really appreciate your time and being on this call today. And hopefully you got something out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, have a good day.
Great. Thanks, Elena.
Bye. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.